All right.
You take the main thing, speak something.
Hi guys. Everybody ready? Settle down.
Yeah. I've already done that. It's already scheduled.
My name is Ani. This is Rachit. We're part of the Drupal Camp Mumbai 2015 organizing team. Everybody, welcome to Drupal Camp 2015. Thank you for being here.
2015, guys.
Thank you so much for being here. This is the 4th edition of Drupal Camp Mumbai. Rachit started this madness in 2011 when Dries Boytart, I hope a lot of people know about him, came to India in 2011.
It's the same place.
Same place.
Same
so
place.
We're back in the same place. So I'm going to go over a few things very quickly with you. We don't have much time, and Mike Lamb is here. So we're just going to go over things very quickly. We don't have much time. We're a little delayed. So the Drupal Camp is basically a gathering for Drupalers, enthusiasts, professionals, and this time a lot of students. Thank you for coming. Come together and discuss Drupal, be part of the community, learn how to contribute, learn what Drupal is all about, where Drupal is going, how businesses can do more, how educational organizations can do more, and what's being done in the government sector too. So there's a lot of stuff for everybody. Just to go over things very briefly, after this will be Mike's keynote. We'll break for tea. Then we'll separate out into multiple tracks. There'll be 2 tracks on expert sessions. So we have 10 expert sessions being delivered. They're one hour long sessions. They're in lecture hall 12 and 13. Parallelly, we'll have the Drupal in a day. So all of you who don't know anything about Drupal, that'll be a fantastic opportunity for you to come and learn about Drupal. You'll be able to even get your own Drupal, a small Drupal site ready by the end of the day. It's a 5-hour long workshop by TCS's Amol Tatkare. And then we have, running parallelly, we have 2 free workshops for advanced and intermediate users. One on porting modules from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. So Drupal 8, for those you don't know, is the latest version of Drupal, and it's going to be fantastic, and Mike's going to enlighten us on that as well, where the future is headed. The second workshop is on headless Drupal, which, again, is an advanced workshop, but it's free for all. So please do make sure that you do register. You've done your pre-registration on your user accounts when you registered. There will be a sheet at the workshop as well for you to put down your information if you forgot to check which workshop you were going to attend. Then there is another parallel track on some special panels that we have. One of them is the CXO Roundtable. This has become kind of a mainstay of the business track on at Drupal camps, especially in India. So anybody who, we did send out invitations. This is an invitation-only panel, but people who are, let's say, department heads or business heads in the audience, if you haven't received an invitation, please do come to the boardroom on the 4th floor, and we can add you in there. We have about 10 different seats available to join the panel. It's a roundtable discussion, and I'll be moderating, and Rachit will be there. This will be followed by a project showcase. So companies who want to display what they have done in Drupal, some fantastic stuff, they can do that. This is after lunch. Then we'll break for tea, and we'll have another panel. This is a new panel that we're introducing this year called Drupal and Open Source in Government and Education. It's going to be a fantastic panel. So if anybody wants to know what open source, what kind of work is being done in open source and Drupal, in these two verticals, you're welcome to come. It's an open panel for everybody to attend with 6 panelists. Then, so briefly, we have volunteers here, as you see. Anybody wearing a red lanyard is a volunteer. Please, if you have any questions, seek them out, ask them questions. They are here to help you. Make sure also, very importantly, when we break for lunch at 1:30, everybody needs to gather outside on the 2nd floor. There's a big terrace, and we're going to take a group photograph. All right, so everybody who's breaking out of sessions or workshops, please make sure you get to the 2nd floor for lunch. But before lunch, we're going to take a group photograph. Nobody gets lunch if you're not in the group photograph. Rachit is going to introduce the organizing committee and give you a little background on what Drupal Camp or Drupal Mumbai, the organizing team behind it for the last few years, has been doing, and what our plans are, very briefly.
So Drupal, I think I'm fine here. All right. So Drupal Mumbai, the whole manner started 2011. Like I said, when Dries was here, right at this place, from where the whole Drupal Mumbai thing started. And, I think from then till now, we have grown from, roughly, 100 to, 7,000, odd, community members. We are also, now the biggest, community in India, Drupal community in India, which is, matter of big proud. And
yeah, we got 1,000 registrations, and well, people are still trickling in, so it'll be fun.
And we're still getting, questions that, is registration open? You want to register for the event? So Drupal Camp Mumbai, takes a lot of effort, and we have, organizers, who have put in a lot of effort. I want to, quickly take, some names, the guys who have taken, put a lot of efforts. So Annie and I, are the one of the organizers. Beside that, logistics team, was headed by Vishal Gala. Okay, I think he's not here; he's just managing other things. We have, sponsorship thing was taken care by P. Sundar, who is again the in charge for venue and facilities. Thank you to IIT management and Sundar especially. Anyway, I don't have. Anyway, there are sponsors here.
So, just to introduce, well, Drupal camps cannot be possible. This is a very large event for us. It requires a lot of support and money and time and volunteers. So, just to introduce you to the sponsors that we have, TCS, second time in a row, is our platinum sponsor. Thank you, Arvind, and the entire TCS team. Take everybody, please. Thank you. IIT Bombay, Professor Sundar and Professor Kanan of FOSSI. They are responsible for getting the venue, the student outreach, which has been so successful. Thank you to IIT and FOSSI, the FOSSI project. Those are our 2 platinum sponsors. Then we have Blistering, is a t-shirt sponsor, so everybody's got a t-shirt, and you see these cool t-shirts that we're wearing. That's because of Blistering.
Cool tags that you're wearing.
Yeah, so, Blistering has been one of the oldest supporters of Drupal Mumbai. Thank you, Blistering. Capgemini, another big Drupal shop in Bombay. They're the first time Gold Plus sponsor here, and they're sponsoring the after party. So those who are lucky to be invited to the after party will find out and can thank them in person, buy them a few drinks. We have a whole bunch of gold sponsors. Accelerant has been a gold sponsor for a while. They sponsor other events as well, the 2nd year in a row. Thank you, Accelerant. We have Ixala, who's been a fantastic supporter for the last few years for Drupal Mumbai. They're our gold supporter also. Thank you, Ixala. We have a new member of the team joining the community, IntelliSwift. Thank you so much. First time, gold sponsor. Amazing. We have Srijan Technologies from Delhi, who are a gold sponsor for Drupal Mumbai for the first time. And they're the ones responsible for each part for DCD as well, which, is a small, tiny affair. It happens in Delhi. Then we have fantastic silver sponsors, Q8042, who do some fantastic work in Pune. Thank you, Vipeng and his team. Piyush is also here doing the workshop, by the way, the first workshop. One more thing. Piyush Kumar, there's an Indiegogo campaign happening. Now, for those who don't know, DrupalCon is a massive, massive event that happens once a year in North America and once a year in Europe. And there's one news I'll give you after that. So they started an Indiegogo campaign for Piyush Kumar. The tweet will go out very quick soon. It's a scheduled tweet. Please follow it, contribute to it. We're trying to send Piyush Kumar, getting enough money to send Piyush Kumar to DrupalCon LA in May. So whatever you can give, if you can share that information, retweet it, share it, so we can reach that target of $3,000. About, I think, what, 1,000 is left? How much is left? The paying? $2,000? 9 days? Yeah, all right. So try it out. So QED42 has been doing a lot of good work. Trigen is another bronze sponsor. Thank you, Trigen, for the first time. And welcome to the community. And then we have partners. We have Code Jedi, who's going to be doing the code sprint on day 2. They're our partner. So hackathon partner. Open Source for You is a media partner. Thank you, Open Source for You. Used to be called Linux for You, for those you don't know. TrackNext is our media partner as well. And one more.
We have IIT Bombay as our university partner.
University partner. And I'm forgetting one.
That's
anyway, you'll see. All right. So Rachit will talk briefly about just 3 minutes on what Drupal Mumbai is all about and what kind of things we do, and then we'll invite Mike.
Yep. Thanks, Annie. So Drupal Mumbai is like, this phenomena started, and, what we are trying to do is, build a, very strong and vibrant community. We do a lot of events like code sprints, workshops, trainings, and, we reach out to all the organizations. Recently, one of the things that we have started is, we have something called organization spots, where we reach out to the organization. We find one evangelist, one guy who's a kind of, mentor within the organization. And he's like, circulates all the Drupal related information that's happening in the community inside, and involve that organization into the community. So what I would appeal that I think we are 70 odd organizations who are participating in this conference today. So I would appeal to them that they can probably find one guy who is like active and take leadership role, and be the part of this Drupal community. So I think we can just
All right. I think EndNotes, anything else? Well, Rachit will also be talking tomorrow on a new program for students. It's very important, Drupal Campus Ambassador Program. Okay. So tomorrow, please stay back, or I'll come back tomorrow and be part of the, join the Community Summit, and you'll learn about what the Drupal Campus Ambassador Program is, by the way. So, yeah, I guess we're done for now. Let me invite Mike Lamb. Mike Lamb is currently the Director of Marketing Technology Strategy at Pfizer worldwide, and also the board member of Drupal Association, which is the nonprofit organization behind Drupal and evangelizes Drupal around the world. Mike, you want to get on stage? Sure. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Cool. Thank you. So, good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right, is this? This looks good. Okay, so I'm really very excited to be here today. This is actually my very first trip to India. So I've been in India now for 57 hours, and it's unusual to track the amount of time you spend in a country in hours. But I'm doing this because of the amount I've seen since I've been here, and the amount I've done can only kind of be expressed when I'm doing it in hours. So I haven't slept very much since I've been here because of the time zone to the US, but in 57 hours, I've already seen like caves that have been carved by people over 900 years. This was quite incredible. Oops, this is kind of a bit weird. Seen monkeys? I have not actually seen monkeys before, and baby monkeys. So this was quite an experience. Seen some amazing temples. This was fantastic as well. And I didn't know, these guys didn't tell me. I knew about Goa being pretty close to here, but I didn't know you actually had beaches very close to here as well. So this was very interesting to actually go to the beach, and certainly an unexpected part of my trip. I also got to meet some startups. So I got to meet about 5 different startups that are based here in Mumbai. And this was great to actually start to understand some of the talents, or some of the talent that's available. And it was really incredible. It was like being in Silicon Valley, seeing the kind of talent, the kind of people that are building really very innovative companies right here. So this was very interesting. I also got to meet some team members. So I've been working with lots of people in the Drupal community here and with TCS. And it was great after a few years to actually meet some of the team members. So for several years, we've been working remotely together, but it's fantastic to actually collaborate. And by the end of yesterday, just through asking questions and then talking constantly, I was starting to lose my voice. I'm starting to get a bit of a sore throat just from talking so much. And the only way, this happened multiple times with the folks I've been with, the only way they've managed to get me to stop talking, because I've been so excited about what's happening, is by giving me, amazing food, amazing food and alcohol. So some fantastic drinks that I've been having here as well. So this has been very, very enjoyable. So there's three things I'd like to talk about today. The first one is technology. So I've got a few of these quotes for you guys to read as I go through. Hopefully you'll find them relevant to what I'm talking about. So lots of trends going on in technology, so much going on in technology, everybody knows this. And three of the trends I'd like to talk about today are here. The first one is the Internet of Things. So who here has heard of the Internet of Things? Everybody heard of the Internet of Things? Brilliant, okay. So, sorry, this is clicking forward a little too much. So the really important thing to know about the Internet of Things is by the end of 2015, it's expected that there'll be 25 billion internet-connected devices. And at the end of 2015, there'll be around 7 billion people on the planet, and about half of them connected to the internet. So without us even realizing it, the internet has turned from this thing that allows people to communicate and share to allow our devices on a massive, massive scale to communicate and share. And this is going to have tremendous, tremendous impact. Who here has a smartphone on them, right? Everybody have a smartphone? Everybody I've seen has a I'm going to give up on this thing. This is going way ahead. Everybody I've seen has a smartphone. And these things are packed full of sensors, so many sensors with a lot of computing power, and of course are connected directly to the internet. And this has happened very recently. Suddenly we're carrying around these devices that have this immense power. They can collect this much data. And of course we have sensors like GPS and all these different things. Actually, I started to realize the power from this with one of these startups that we met earlier on in the week, where they were using other sensors, the accelerometer and Wi-Fi, and these different things to detect people's locations inside buildings, right? So inside buildings, they were using Wi-Fi signal and all these different things and accelerometers to detect where you were without GPS within 5 or 6 feet. So they can figure out where you are. So there's a lot of these sensors, and they're being used in ways that we couldn't possibly imagine. And a huge amount of power will come from this with what you can do with this data. Okay. And it's not just the smartphones that are full of sensors. We're putting these smart sensors in our houses as well. Have you guys heard of the Nest thermostat? Who's heard of the Nest thermostat? So this is a smart thermostat that we put into our houses that's connected to the internet. And you think this is a pretty boring device, right? A device that you just use to set the temperature you'd like it to be in your house. But this can have quite a dramatic impact when this is connected to the internet. So I have these at home. I have one in my house and one in my office. And they learn so much about you. So mine, without me having to do anything and just setting the temperature to what I want it to be, it learned my preferences at different times of day. And it also learned my habits. It learned what time I get to my office in the morning, and it learned how long it takes it to get to the temperature I like it from whatever temperature it might be. So without me, again, having to do anything, just from the sensors built into this thing, passively collecting this data, when I get up in the morning, about 20 minutes before I get to my office, it just turns on, and it just turns on the heating, and it just gets everything to the temperature I want it to be without wasting any energy. Now, these get even smarter. So obviously, I'm not in my office today. I'm not going to get to my office when it expects me to in the morning, but it already knows that I'm not home. It's already detected that the first day when I didn't walk in front of this, it didn't turn on the heating, and it saved a lot of energy. At the same point, it knows that I'm not home, but my wife's home, so the rest of the house is being heated as it should be. So these devices are working incredibly well to save energy. So Nest was acquired by Google last year. Okay, so Google acquired this company. Who thinks Google are interested in getting into the home thermostat hardware business, right? Google aren't interested in this. Google are a data company. So the reason I think Google bought this was, of course, from the data that can be collected. And very shortly after Google acquired Nest, they signed a contract or a partnership with Austin Energy in the US. So Austin Energy, they have this challenge that when it gets very hot in Austin, there's a massive demand for electricity as everybody turns their air conditioning on, right? I guess you guys are quite familiar with this. And the problem they have is they can't meet the demand, right? And they have to have gas generators in order to generate enough electricity. Excuse me a second to meet the. See, I've been talking way too much. They have to have these gas generators to create additional electricity to meet the demand from all of these air conditioning units. So what they did, what Google and Nest did, they said, we will pay everybody with a Nest thermostat $85. We'll pay you $85 for permission to control your thermostat when you're not home. And then when there's this additional surge for electricity, when it gets very hot and everybody turns on their air conditioning, Google turned down the air conditioning for anybody who's not home, and it reduces the need for this power. And now Austin Energy aren't having to spin up the auxiliary gas power stations or generators that's saving them many, many millions of dollars, right? So this pretty boring device that we had in our house before is now being connected to the internet, and it's become really, really smart as a result of it. And it has some dramatic impact, far more than anybody would think, from initially just making this device connected to the internet. And there's many, many more of these devices. So with large organizations, Apple are getting behind this with HomeKit. There's a lot of companies getting behind creating these kind of devices within our homes, smoke alarms, lighting, all sorts of different things people are building here. So it's got so big, in fact, that Samsung, of course, make all sorts of devices. They make smartphones, of course. They make fridges. They make TVs. They make ovens. They make all sorts of devices. Samsung have said that by the end of 2020, every single product they make, so everything that Samsung make, will be connected to the internet. That's only 5 years away. And actually within 2 years, they say 90% of their products are going to be connected to the internet. So before we know it, these things that we interact with day to day will be connected to the internet. And these devices are pretty smart when they're on their own. So the Nest thermostat is pretty smart when it's on its own. But when we connect this together with other data sources or other Internet of Things devices, it gets even more powerful. So in this case here, Nest announced a partnership with a company called Automatic last year. So Automatic, they make this sensor, this module that plugs into your car, and it collects all sorts of data about your car. So it collects diagnostic information, speed, all sorts of different things. And it connects to your smartphone and then to the internet. And what this partnership means, this means that when you get in your car at the end of the day and you've got one of these, it communicates in real time with your Nest thermostat at home and says, you're going to be home in 50 minutes, 49 minutes, etc. And the Nest thermostat knows exactly what it needs to do to get the house to the temperature you want it to be before you arrive, or just as you arrive, without wasting any energy. So this is Automatic and Nest, but all sorts of different partnerships could have come up here. It might not be turning on your thermostat or turning on your heating or cooling. It might be turning on your oven or preparing the house for your arrival. There's a lot that can happen here. But there's a need, in many cases, for something in the middle. So if it's more complex than this, maybe there's a need for something in the middle. There's a need for a tool here that can connect to the open APIs from Nest and from Automatic to take this data in and allow a user to set their preferences of what they would like to happen in these different circumstances. And in many cases, companies like Apple are building this functionality with HomeKit, but there'll be many, many other use cases that will come up here. So for me, I'm really interested to see how over time we can start to have things like Drupal play a part of this. So Drupal with Drupal 8 has very good connection to web services. So imagine as these 25 billion devices are connected to the internet, what we can start doing with the data we can collect from them. Maybe if you're building a Drupal site today, many people are building Drupal sites and things like recipe sites, right? Just as an example, maybe the expectation is not too far in the future that when you build your recipe site, it connects to your fridge and allows you to filter the recipes based on the food that you actually have at home. There could be all sorts of use cases that people come to expect when we have this massive, massive volume of data become available. 25 billion, that's a lot of devices that will be connected to the internet. And the companies themselves will be, of course, using this data and making value of this data as much as they possibly can be. Nest also makes smoke alarms, by the way. And it's not just the devices that we're carrying with us, or the devices that we're putting into our homes. There's these wearables as well. So these have become really very, very popular. Fitness tracking devices, activity tracking devices that are gathering even more data. And we don't just put these on our nightstand when we sleep, we even wear these when we sleep. So these even know our sleep patterns. Some of them are listening to you when you're sleeping. They will know an awful lot about us. And they're also a screen or a device to give you some really great contextual information and feedback. And if it's not enough to have it on your wrist, some companies, again announced at CES a few weeks ago, are stitching these sensors into their clothing. So they're stitching these sensors into their clothing so they can understand the performance of their individual muscles as they exercise. So this is typically for athletes and these kind of things, to allow them to really understand how each of their muscles are actually performing as they're training. It's going to be really, really quite interesting for them. So we're collecting all of this data on our physical activity, and there's a tremendous amount of data here. And we're joining this up with all sorts of other data around location, proximity, these things, and we can use this to improve our lives, to improve our fitness, improve our sleep, just generally improve our lives. And this gives us a massively expanded view of ourselves that we call the quantified self. And what's interesting is all around the world, there are groups who are getting together, just collecting this data and just wanting to show each other what they're collecting. And when I was taking a look around, looking at some of the groups, one of the biggest groups, in fact, the biggest I could find, is actually right here in Mumbai. So if this stuff is interesting to you, or you have wearable devices and you're tracking this data, there's a lot of people not very far away who are really interested in this as well, and actually building a community around it. There are lots of medical uses for these smartphones and these sensors as well. So as well as the sensors that are built into our devices that are obviously very powerful and a lot that can be done with them, for not very much money, you can attach additional sensors to them as well. So you can get some medical diagnostics equipment. The full version of this equipment would cost thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. And in many cases, you can buy attachments for your smartphone that's only a few $100s that are nearly as good. They're nearly as good, and they're connected to this really quite powerful device that has a fantastic screen, a lot of processing power. There's also, of course, connected to the internet. So there's a lot of powerful use cases from these as well. In fact, in India, there's this company called HealthPoint Solutions. I don't know if anybody's heard of this company, but they're addressing a challenge. So in India, you have one doctor for every 1,700 people. And then in remote locations, obviously, it's challenging to get access. So HealthPoint Solutions are starting to use telemedicine and internet connectivity and video calling to connect people in remote locations by video to a doctor in a city somewhere. So imagine how much more powerful this could be if there's just a basic smartphone there with some of this diagnostics equipment that isn't necessarily even that expensive. This could be tremendously powerful in what can be done with these smart sensors connected to smart devices. And if it's not on our wrists or in our clothing, people are wearing them on their head as well. So Google Glass, as much as this hasn't caught on maybe as much as Google would have hoped, if you take a look on YouTube, there are some really, really good examples of how this is changing a lot of industries. This is really having a lot of practical use cases in multiple industries. And obviously Microsoft also think there's something here. I don't know if people have seen the video for the Microsoft HoloLens that recently came out with Windows 10, or the announcement of Windows 10. But they're being even more ambitious about what they can do with this head-mounted equipment. As much as a lot of people say this is obviously quite intrusive, it's very innovative what they're doing, companies are even building smart devices into contact lenses. So if they can continue this level of innovation, maybe we'll have non-intrusive devices like contact lenses really play a part here, which could be really extremely powerful. So this is the Internet of Things without even talking about drones, like drones and drone delivery and everything that come from this, which can be tremendously impactful. Self-driving cars. So self-driving cars are already legal in multiple states in the US. You can already have a self-driving car there. For my 2 days in Mumbai, I'm very intrigued to see how they might work here. This could be very interesting. And 3D printing. So we even have a 3D printer now on the space station. You can email tools to space. This is going to have a massive, massive impact as well. So there's so much going on in this area of the Internet of Things. It's having a huge amount of impact with these 25 billion devices that we'll have by the end of the year. So Another important thing to know about the Internet of Things is that by 2020, this is expected to be a $7.1 trillion per year industry. $7.1 trillion in 1 year by 2020. So this is a massive, massive number. In fact, it's easy to jump from millions to billions to trillions without really kind of realizing the impact. So I've got a bit of an experiment here. So each of you now have a startup company creating an Internet of Things product, right? And your company earns $1 per second in revenue. 24 hours a day, it earns $1 per second in revenue. So this is $3,600 per hour. Everybody want this company? Does this look good? Okay, how long do you think it's going to take your company to earn its first $1 million in revenue? So $1 million in revenue, how long do you think it's going to take your company to earn it? Any guesses? You want to take a guess? Is it days, weeks, months, years? Days, right. It takes 11.5 days for your company earning this revenue to earn $1 million. How long do you think it's going to take your company to earn $1 billion? $1 billion in revenue, that's a lot of money. How long is it going to take this company to earn $1 billion? It's going to take 32 years for your company to earn $1 billion. $1 billion is a really, really big number. And we said the Internet of Things is $7.1 trillion by 2020. How long do you think it's going to take this Internet of Things company, obviously a lot of revenue in this company, to earn $1 trillion? It's 32,000 years, right? This is a massive, massive, massive number. And we skipped from 1 million to 1 billion to 1 trillion without even realizing it. And this has tremendous, tremendous impact. So in fact, at this scale, there's enough room. So this is around a $30 million company a year, a big, big company. And there's enough room by 2020 for about 250,000, 250,000 of these companies. So this is happening on a massive, massive scale, which is why it's not so surprising when you see companies like Samsung putting everything behind it, saying they're going to get every device that they make connected to the internet. This is coming really, really fast. And I talk about this coming really, really fast to family and friends all the time. And one of the reactions I get is, we've been talking about this forever. We've been talking about smart fridges. I remember going to an expo once, I think it was about 15 years ago, and they had this home of the future with the smart fridge. We've been talking about this for a long time. Why isn't it here yet? Is it really coming now? Is it really going to be this big, this quick? And I always want to talk about exponential growth. So here's another quick scenario for you. I don't know if you can see it here, but there's one dot in the middle of the screen. Can you see it? So imagine this is the night sky, the black night sky, and it's got one star in the middle of the sky. And then after some time, there are 2 stars. It's even smaller. I don't know if you can see it up there. There are 2 stars now. So the number of stars has doubled. And this doubles again and again and again and again for 30 days. And I can tell you, after 30 days, the entire night sky is full of stars. So this will be completely white. The entire night sky will be full of stars because it will double and double and double. 20 days into the 30-day process, how much of the sky do you think is full of stars? Any guesses? So a percentage. How much of the sky is full of stars 20 days into this process? Any guesses? 20%? 80, did you say? 90? 90%? You'd think it would be pretty big, right? 20 days into this 30-day process, you think it was pretty much done. 20 days into this process, 0.01% of the sky is full of stars. 0.01%. It looks something like this. After 23 days, it will look like this. 26 days, it will look like this. 29 days, it will look like this. And after 30 days, it will look like this. This is exponential growth. It's incredible how fast these things grow and how fast these things come to you. So a lot of these devices, a lot of these smart devices, they're only 20 days into their 30-day cycle. So people might be talking about head-mounted equipment and all these different things and say, you know, that's never going to come, that's a fad, it's not coming. It's only 20 days in. These things are coming, they're coming really, really fast, and they're coming like smart devices. Only a few years ago, people would think we're insane for suggesting that everybody here today would have a smartphone. And everybody does. Everybody has one of these internet-connected devices, and it came so fast, people didn't even really realize it. So what we need to do is make sure that we're ready. We're ready to take advantage of all the data is going to be collected from these many, many smart devices, because it's going to become an expectation of the people that we're working with on building web properties and other things to really harness a lot of this data. So the second big trend in technology I want to talk about is predicting user behavior. So I think a really interesting thing's happening in terms of our relationship with our devices. So our relationship with our devices is changing from one that we have a question and we get our device out and we open up Google and we ask our device this question and our device gives us answers. We're changing from that relationship to a relationship where our devices know so much about us, they have so much data about us and our environment that our devices know what questions we need answers to. They know what information we want before we even know to ask the question of our devices. And this is happening often without us even realizing it, because the amount that can happen from the data that's being collected from these sensors, often passive data collection, and it's going to have a lot of impact to an awful lot of areas we might not expect. So Amazon, anybody heard of Amazon pre-delivery they're doing here? Okay, this is really interesting, right? Again, like the thermostat, you wouldn't expect like the data collection data collection like this to impact things like how Amazon are sending their products to people. But Amazon are getting so good, so accurate at guessing or predicting what products somebody's going to buy. They're prepared to ship the item to them or start shipping the item to them before they've even clicked the purchase button. Right, so before they've clicked purchase, they're so sure they're going to do it, they'll start shipping the product. So an example here is, I'm into photography, I like photography, I have a Canon camera, and if I'm looking at a new lens on Amazon, and I look at it maybe over several days, they've got me figured out. They figure out I'm going to buy that lens before long, right? And I know Amazon, they keep their Canon lenses in a warehouse in Manchester. I know this because sometimes I've tricked them and I bought it just straight away. And Manchester is about 5 hours away from where I live. So if Amazon want to get it to me next day, that could be very expensive for them to do. They might not have a truck going in that direction at that time. It could be very expensive for them to try and get it to me next day. But instead, they figure out that I'm going to buy it a few days before. And when they happen to have a truck going from Manchester to Newport, which is my local depot, which of course has some capacity, their algorithms, without anybody doing anything, just puts the lens on the truck. Then magically, when I click purchase, the lens isn't like 5 hours away and difficult to get to me. It's 15 minutes away. It's just down the road. It's an awful lot easier for them to delight me, give me a great user experience, and get this to me immediately the next day. And of course, this is a step to them getting towards their drone delivery. Imagine if I click that buy button and it's going to get to me within an hour. This will be really game changing. And I thought this was interesting in terms of the amount of data and what can be done with this. And I had another example recently, or an experience with Netflix. So I like Netflix. And recently, my behavior with Netflix changed. I went from binge watching Breaking Bad like very late at night and staying up all night watching programs like that, to getting up insanely early in the morning and watching Disney programs, right? Why did this happen? This happened because my wife and I had a baby. So I was getting up early in the morning, looking after the baby, trying to keep him happy with like Disney going on in the background. Okay, so this was a change in behavior, and Netflix were watching my behavior. So what happened next? What happened is they added a kids section to the homepage of my Netflix. So when I go to Netflix now, it has a kids section there. They knew that I had a kid, right? My TV is now smart enough that it can figure me out, knows what I'm doing completely passively from the data that's being collected, and figure out that I had a kid. So as soon as I saw this freaked me out a little bit, right? As in the data that was being collected. And I did a bit of research to see if this is happening anywhere else, where else other companies are doing this. And if they can figure out I've had a kid, what else can companies figure out? So Target, people might have heard of this example with Target, but Target had a customer recently who was complaining, and he was complaining because Target had sent coupons and advertisements to his teenage daughter around products for babies, all sorts of products for babies. And he was pretty upset because he was like, are you encouraging my daughter to have a baby? Why are you sending her these materials? You shouldn't be doing that. And Target, of course, said, we'll look into this and we'll call you back. So they called him back. And when they called him back, he apologized. And I think the quote was, he said, there seemed to be things going on in my house that I wasn't aware of. Because it turned out his daughter was pregnant and he didn't know about it, right? So we're living in a world where these kind of organizations, through passive data collection, know more about us, ourselves, than even our closest family members do, right? So there's an awful lot of power that can come from this. One more example. Does anybody know what this graph is here? It's from Facebook. Anybody know what this is? Sorry? This is the correlation between the number of wall posts between two individuals over time, leading up to them changing their relationship status on Facebook. So this is wall posts. So this is two people communicating on their timeline, leading up to and after they've changed their relationship status, right? So Facebook are tracking this data, of course, completely passively. They publish these results. But it's really interesting, because of Facebook have this across many, many millions of people who are going through this experience. So what's interesting is, when in this line up here of these wall posts, do we know that we're probably going to end up in a relationship with this person? And then based on the data that Facebook have across many, many millions of use cases and having many data points around the timing, how long does it take this person to respond? Do they look at the message for 5 minutes and then you very carefully type out the answer? With all of this data that Facebook are collecting, do Facebook know that we're going to get into this relationship before we know ourselves? We're really getting to this point where there is so much power in this data that's being collected, and I don't think people often realize it. So one other example here, British Airways. So I like British Airways. I often fly on British Airways. I love using their services. They build their services to really delight their customers, right? Make it as easy as they possibly can for their customers. And I like the example with British Airways because they have an online component. They have a website, ba.com. They have a mobile application that I use all the time. And of course, they have an offline component, which is actually turning up to the airport and flying. So what's interesting here is how they've connected these together. So I'll go online and I'll book a flight. So I booked my flight here to Mumbai. And when I open after I've done that, I open up my iPhone application, and immediately there's contextual information. There's beautiful photography of Mumbai. I start getting excited about my trip. These things are connected. Online, I do a search. So I do a search because I'm looking to go on a holiday somewhere. And the search results, or what I've searched for, is immediately available on my phone as well. And this has worked for them a couple of times when I've been at the airport and I open the iOS application straight away because I need it to get the Wi-Fi password, I need it for my boarding pass. And I'm in the airport lounge waiting to take off, and I've got some time. And I've got one click here that I can go book another flight. And this has worked many, many times for them. So this is interesting. This is them working very, very hard to connect their online experience with their iPhone or their mobile application experience, and it works well. But they've connected it to their offline experience of actually flying as well. So I said with Netflix, my behavior recently changed, and it changed because of my wife and I had a baby. My behavior with British Airways changed as well. I have a lot of colleagues based in the US, and I was traveling to New York really very frequently. And of course, when the baby was coming, I slowed down and wasn't traveling so much. And British Airways spotted this. They spotted I had a very, very standard behavior of typically flying to the same location and doing it on a regular basis. And then I stopped. So something changed, and they detected this. I had no idea, but the first time I went back to the airport afterwards, I turned up at the check-in desk and they swiped my passport. And I was slightly confused because they said, "Welcome back, Mr. Lamb. We've missed you." I thought, this is really strange. This isn't the relationship you normally have with when you're checking in your bags. And they'd upgraded me on my flight completely for free. So they gave me this really warm, welcome back. And I was walking through the airport what just happened? And it took me some time to kind of figure out what had happened. But they're collecting this user behavior. I don't know what they thought had happened. Maybe they thought I discovered WebEx and wasn't traveling anymore as much, or maybe they thought I was traveling on a competing airline. But they spotted this, and they used the opportunity to give me something that really didn't cost them anything, that made me feel like a really valued customer. It was a really, really great customer experience. So across all these different things, they're collecting this data, and they're using it really well to delight their customers. And this is actually really, really difficult to do. So for any of you building these kind of services, you'll know how hard it is to actually achieve this. It can be very difficult. But British Airways understand it, and I see many, many other companies replicating this. So they're collecting this passive data. Do you think British Airways know about the Internet of Things and all these sensors that are coming? Of course they do. And I did a little bit of Googling about this. I didn't expect to find what I found, but I found British Airways are working on piloting a happiness blanket. So this is a blanket that you wear when you're flying that is full of sensors, and it's woven with fiber optics. And it changes color based on your mood when you're flying with British Airways, right? So they can detect your mood and then decide whether they need to give you some additional service or something else needs to happen to change your experience with them flying. So this is a pretty extreme example. I'd love to see if they actually come out with this. But these companies are really understanding the data that's available and the expectations now. And it's really interesting to see some of these innovative products they're coming out with. So you'll see this emerging pattern. And the emerging pattern is we're collecting all this data from wherever we can, from sensors, from passive collection, from people using our web properties, from all sorts of different places, clickstream data. And we're trying to get this together and crunch the data to really understand what the person's doing, what they might be doing, and then deliver great personalization services and then great user experiences on top of this. And as I said, this is really hard. Anybody who's tried this before will know it's really, really hard. And you need to put multiple things together to do this. But one of the things I love about working with Drupal is within the larger ecosystem of Drupal, people really understand this. They understand how difficult it is, and they work to make Drupal-specific products, where in other industries or with other technologies, you don't often get this. They make Drupal-specific products to make this really easy. So in this case, Acquia, with Acquia Lift in the Drupal ecosystem, are making Lift and Context DB, which are products entirely focused on making this challenge for Drupal as easy as it possibly can be. So you plug a few things in, connect it to Drupal, and it starts collecting your data. You can combine it with your offline data and start targeting and personalizing for Drupal. It's really quite impressive. One thing I liked about this when it came out was the title of their press release, which was Acquia delivers on the promise of the experience web with Context DB. So the experience web, or web experience management, this is something that people have been talking about for a little while now. And actually, Dries has shown this diagram a few times. This is Dries's diagram of the evolution of the web. And just from what I'm seeing from these companies like British Airways, and there's many other examples out there as well, this is really coming true. Like the web has evolved through multiple generations, starting with the static web, when you build very basic static websites, evolving to the dynamic web. And I was talking to some colleagues yesterday about reminiscing around when we used to write classic ASP and PHP3 and all these different things when we were building dynamic web websites. And then, of course, we've been working for a while now on the assembled web. And this is where Drupal and Drupal 7 has really come in and really helped out here with modules. So with modules, we're often reusing functionality, we're using views and all these different things to build functionality that previously would have taken a lot of code in the dynamic web. One of the things that excites me most about Drupal here is Pfizer adopted Drupal during the life cycle of Drupal 7. So just after Drupal 7 was released. And what's really interesting is for the entire time we've been loving Drupal 7, deploying Drupal 7, getting great experiences from Drupal 7, the community has spent that entire time working away on Drupal 8. Right? So the entire time we've been focused on this and getting really fantastic experiences and fantastic results through Drupal 7, the community is working on Drupal 8. So as we get to this next era or next generation of the web with the experience web, Drupal 8 is already here, waiting for us to be ready to deliver all these things that can be challenging to deliver today. So as people get these greater expectations around their experience, it'll be very interesting to see how Drupal 8 fits in. So Drupal, so web experience management or the experience web, this is something that's people are only starting to really start talking about now. Like marketing teams, people have talked about this coming, but marketing teams are only really starting to ask for a lot of this functionality really growing now. And what's really great here is how long the Drupal community has already been working to solve this problem. So back in 2013 at DrupalCon, Dries did his keynote. And in his presentation, he said context equals experience. And context depends on all these different factors, your past behavior, the intent, the device, the time of the day, the temperature. It depends on all of these different factors. And the question he was answering here is, this is where the web is going, and what are we doing about this within Drupal? And his answer was great. It was really very simple. It was, well, we're working on Drupal 8. We're already working on Drupal 8, and Drupal 8 is focused on many of these challenges around the experience web. And then he went on to talk about Drupal 8 and the multiple initiatives. So within Drupal 8, there are many initiatives focused on different things around core functionality that was to be improved, and talked about how each of them are fundamental building blocks to this experience web. So Drupal has been working on solving this very complex challenge for a long time. Anybody who's been in this industry for a while will know how painful it is to jump through these evolutions, right? Some people are still on previous versions of this, like still building websites using dynamic web approaches. It's very difficult, and it takes a lot of investment for companies to jump through this. Typically, for example, moving from the dynamic web to the assembled web, for us, that meant moving from .NET to Drupal. And it was a tremendous amount of effort. Our partners had to completely retrain on Drupal. They had to learn Drupal. We had to have new partners for hosting. We had to have new processes for support. Everything we knew about our job suddenly changed when we moved to the assembled web. But we had to do it because this was where the future was going, and people were demanding this functionality. And this has happened each time there's been a new generation. Typically, you move to a new technology, and it can be very, very disruptive. So there's some talk or people talking about some of like Drupal 8 coming, and then what is it going to take to upgrade to Drupal 8? And it's not like downloading a new version of an operating system like iOS 8, for example. It's not just one-click upgrade. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. So that's a given, and we'll figure out how to make that as easy as we can do. But at the same time, for me, from my perspective, this is incredible. This is the very first time we've actually jumped from one generation of the web to another and not had to completely re-platform. So for people who are learning Drupal for Drupal within the assembled web, and there's been many companies working in this area for a long time yet, this is really exciting. And the fact all the fundamentals you're learning about Drupal, all the relationships you're building in the Drupal community, these are really, really important, and they'll continue for a long time because Drupal is already aligning itself to a lot of these technologies, or a lot of these things where technology is changing. So the third big trend in technologies to talk about is open source. So there are really big new open source projects appearing all the time. And actually Drupal was on the top 10 open source projects in 2014. And they were still talking about Drupal 7, right? So I'm really excited what happens when the world really learns about Drupal 8 and what's coming here as well. And these aren't technologies that are just being used by hobbyists. They're being adopted by many very large organizations. And large organizations, end users of these tools, are expected to spend more than $1 billion. We realize this is a big number, $1 billion on implementing these technologies this year. So there's an awful lot of investment going into these technologies, and they're being taken very, very seriously. One trend that's also happening in open source, and I saw this in multiple selections of Drupal, is the perception of Drupal and open source and security is changing. So a few years ago, one of the key barriers to people adopting open source in large organizations was perception or lack of understanding about open source and security and how this works. People couldn't understand how this works and that it could really be secure. And multiple research articles and reports have now stated that security in open source has moved from being one of the top barriers of why people won't adopt open source to one of the top reasons people do adopt open source in only a couple of years. So as people have really realized what they need to be doing with web security, with lots of examples of people getting hacked and all these different things, people are coming to open source even faster because they realize how the open source community works with security and how robust this is. We talked about the Internet of Things, and the foundation of the Internet of Things is, of course, built on open source software. The All Seen Alliance is an initiative between lots of very large organizations creating Internet of Things devices because of the fundamentals of these components. If they're going to interact with each other, they need to collaborate in how they're building their technology. And of course, we can't talk about technology or open source without talking about Drupal, and specifically Drupal 8. So Drupal 8, we expect this to be coming out a little bit later on this year. And it has so much additional functionality. I just wanted to mention some of the highlights here. So Drupal 8 is completely responsive. So we've been building responsive websites with Drupal for a long time. So through that whole dynamic web, we've been building assembled web. We've been building responsive websites with Drupal. But now, all of Drupal is responsive. Even the admin interface and the publishing interface, all these things are completely responsive. So if you want to control your site or publish content from your site from a mobile device, you can now do it. And if you think, and this is a common use case, of course, and if you think how hard it would be to build that functionality into something you built on the assembled web, or even back in the dynamic web, if you're building your own CMS and you wanted to make this work really well with the power people are expecting with these content management systems, it's very difficult to achieve. Drupal 8 has a much simpler user interface. So as Drupal has grown, the number of people whose full-time jobs is sat behind Drupal, looking at Drupal screens, managing content in Drupal, there's a lot of people doing this, so we're giving them a much simpler user interface. The tool is super, super flexible, so it's not just for building responsive websites anymore. This can be used for building web applications. It can be used for building the back end for mobile applications. There are so many use cases I've seen where people are using Drupal in really innovative ways. I expect within the life cycle of Drupal 8, there'll be use cases we haven't even thought of how we'll end up using Drupal. Drupal 8 is built on powerful modern frameworks. So in the life cycle of Drupal 7, I've seen people who have got really interested in other frameworks, like Ruby on Rails, for example, and even moved to some of those technologies. And what's really, really pleasing to see is as Drupal's adopting Symfony, and there's some great innovations going on there in terms of things like Laravel and these other tools, people are moving back. They're coming back because they're really interested in how these frameworks work, and really want to get excited about delivering using Drupal again. Multilingual support. So multilingual support, every big CMS, if you look down its feature list, it will say it does multilingual. But it's actually very, very hard to achieve multilingual and do multilingual really well. And if you look at the Drupal 8 multilingual initiative website, you can just get a beginning of the feeling of how much energy has been put into making multilingual work really, really well in Drupal 8. And anybody who's serious about building multilingual websites, this in itself could be a reason to adopt this entire technology. Actually, any of these things in themselves could be a reason to adopt because it's just so powerful and it's done so thoughtfully. Services and communications. We talked about the Internet of Things and the data that will be available. There'll be more APIs than we can possibly imagine for us to collect this data. So we need to be ready with services and communications to gather this data and to be able to interact with multiple other devices and data sources. So all in all, Drupal 8 is shaping up to be really, really an incredible release. And anybody who's excited about working with Drupal 7, just take a look at what's coming around the corner from the same community. It's leading by miles. And what's interesting in open source, as lots of organizations through Drupal and other technologies have started adopting open source, is you can see the impact this is having by the reaction from other companies. So actually not too long ago, Microsoft had some pretty aggressive language about when they were talking about open source and their feelings about Linux and these other tools. They really didn't take it very seriously, and they didn't understand the impact that was coming. You can see companies like this doing a complete turnaround and then stating that they now love open source, they think it's fantastic, they love Linux, they really understand this. And not just stating this and just saying this, actually getting to the point when they're open sourcing their own frameworks. I genuinely thought I would never ever see this day, right? When Microsoft open source .NET. But they have to do it. They have to do it to stay relevant, to get people like you to actually build on their platforms. They need to be open source. You need to understand how these things are working. You need to collaborate. So if this wasn't a big enough kind of milestone to really understand the impact of open source and how seriously people are having to take this now, it's really quite tremendous. So the second big trend, or big thing I want to talk about, is people. So we'll talk about a few trends here within people. First one is location is becoming less important. So face-to-face meetings are still have tremendous value, right? Getting a group together and collaborating, doing this face-to-face is often the best way to do it to solve problems, etc. But generally, location is becoming less of an issue. And I've been working with companies in India for a long time. And I remember 10 years or so ago, if we had a big project and we wanted the project to be successful, and it was getting to crunch time, and we were about to deploy, and it was a big complex application, we would fly a whole bunch of people onshore to get them to finish the project, where we'd all work in one space. Because just through technology, some of the communication issues just made it difficult to do that remotely. That's gone. That's completely gone now. So when I've been communicating with the guys organizing this conference, and certainly my own team here as well, the person might as well be in the next town or the next room with the technology and the communications infrastructure we have today. And this is having a massive impact. And this is having an impact just from what we have today. You know, we have great internet connectivity and all these different things, but technology here is changing so fast that it will make it even easier and have even more impact in the future. So has anybody heard of Google Fiber? Does anybody know what Google Fiber is? So Google Fiber right now is a US-only initiative. So it's a US initiative where Google are rolling out gigabit, low latency, affordable fiber broadband to, or fiber internet connectivity to multiple cities in the US, right? Imagine that, gigabit, low latency, affordable internet connections. So this is going to have a significant impact there as well in these US cities. And they're rolling it out quite slowly, city by city. Can anybody guess where it's now suggested since the end of last year that Google are taking Google Fiber to next? Any guesses where they want to take this to next? India. India, right? I'd love it to be the UK or some other countries, but India is next on the list for where Google want to take Google Fiber. So they'll be starting to connect big cities in India to this gigabit speed internet connection. So this will be very interesting to see what happens. And of course, there's a lot more to India and many other countries than just the major cities that can also struggle to have internet connectivity. So Google are also working on Google Loon. Has anybody heard of this project, Google Loon? This is incredible. They're building these balloons, this massive network of balloons that are floating around the stratosphere with a device attached to the bottom with a network of internet connectivity that will downlink when they're floating over any particular city that has a strong internet connection. Then anywhere underneath these balloons, you can connect to the internet. So their objective is to actually connect all of those 7 billion people to the internet. So just imagine, not just in major cities having this incredible connection, but just having this kind of connection and be able to collaborate with people anywhere in the world, from anywhere in the world. It'd be very interesting to see how what impact this has over time. And it's not just the internet connectivity, the actual tools and services that we're using here as well. These are evolving really fast, and they're evolving so fast, we don't even really acknowledge it sometimes. So 2 examples with Skype and Google Hangouts. It used to be expensive or difficult to make these long distance calls, and now we can call anywhere on the planet or do a video call to anywhere on the planet that has an internet connection in HD completely for free with a choice of services, right? This is a very significant jump, and even with these tools in Google Hangouts, have multiple people participate in these conversations. So the internet connectivity and these tools and services as they're evolving, this is going to change the way we work quite significantly. And it's collaboration as well. So anybody who's used Google Drive and Google Docs, you'll know it's almost easier to collaboratively edit a document over Google Docs when you're on the phone with somebody than it is when you're sat next to someone with just one laptop and Microsoft Word or something like that. It's incredibly easy to use these tools. And Slack as well. If you haven't used Slack, take a look at Slack. Even this event was organized using this technology. And the WordPress community are actually looking at using Slack to replace IRC. And in their case, they're seeing, in their pilot they've done so far, they've seen 4 times as much engagement from people using from using Slack. So I guess they'll be moving towards that. And these tools really work very well for helping people collaborate from multiple different locations. Second big trend in people is the future of work. So these things will change how we work. Of course, they will change how we work and how we're doing business. And there's a lot of need for focused work. So as we're doing development, particularly as we're doing development within open source and these various different technologies, there's a need to solve some really, really challenging problems, often problems that we haven't seen before. And I've seen changes in behavior from my own team. So in my own team, we have the tools for communicating, and that's great because I can talk to people even though they're located in all sorts of different locations. But some of the developers on my team, particularly those that are focused on some particularly challenging problems, have now moved to a work schedule where they they have several hours set aside per day for communication and several hours set aside per day for non-interrupted development. And they asked to do this, and I let them do it, and the results were pretty outstanding. And it made me actually realize that when I'm hiring developers, it's interesting to see how much time developers actually spend in the zone developing, actually writing code, right? It's actually, in many cases, it's much less than 50% of their actual job is actually developing, actually writing code, because there's so much else that's necessary in order to get your job done. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves over time to get the working environments in place to be able to support really very focused work. Now, the third trend to talk about here very briefly is education. And you have an education panel today where you'll talk in far more detail about education than certainly I can. But this technology is having a tremendous impact here as well. So education isn't just for the privileged anymore. If you have an internet connection, there are these massively open online courses where anybody can sign up and you can learn so many different things, and often they're free. Sometimes there are services that charge a pretty minimal subscription fee to learn many, many different things about different materials, about different subjects. And there's a fantastic example here as well with Spoken Tutorial from IIT. So I actually signed up for this website, and I went on some tutorials, and they were really, really quite impressive. So I learned I saw how to install Drupal locally. So there's a video in English to show you how to get Drupal set up locally in 15 minutes. And this actually reminded me, because I spent a lot of time managing big Drupal projects, but not so much time actually hands-on with Drupal anymore. You can install Drupal in 15 minutes, right? I'd love to see some of these other technologies and how long they take to actually get set up, but you can get a working Drupal environment that fast. There's also some examples here of learning how to set up a local PHP development environment. So in this example, this video was recorded in 8 different languages. So in terms of getting these materials available and out to people, 8 different languages, completely for free, is fantastic in terms of the material that's being developed and shared out there. And it's really, really can change things in terms of people learning about these technologies. Proving your qualifications, this can expand over time as well. So all of the ways, of course, we've historically talked to people about their qualifications when applying the job are, of course, still valid. But I spend a lot of time in interviews now talking to people about their GitHub profile. On their GitHub profile, what projects have they contributed to? What challenges have they faced? What technologies they're interested in? Or their Drupal.org user profile. You can learn so much about somebody and their involvement in the community just from their Drupal.org user profile. So people who can solve difficult problems can demonstrate they can solve difficult problems in the Drupal community, that they're really, really great people to be hiring. So this will change over time as this will become more and more important in terms of these online profiles, in terms of certification and understanding people's qualifications. This will be very interesting. Okay, so the third and last thing to talk about here is changes in processes. So I'm going to go through this at a pretty high level. So together I'm going to talk about continuous delivery, scientific method, and failure, recovery over avoidance, again, at a pretty high level. So much is changing here. Do you think companies are building teams, innovation teams, and say, okay, what's going to change over the next 5 years? You guys, you go and build a Google Glass application or a Microsoft HoloLens application. This isn't happening. This typically isn't how companies work. They won't just invest in these things. I'm sure a lot of you guys, very similar to me, you're very busy just working on the things that you're doing today. So this is a difficult question to invest some time in answering. But there's a far more interesting question, not what is going to change over the next 5 years, but what isn't going to change over the next 5 years, right? So what is a problem today that without further investment will still be a problem in 5 years' time? Because if you can invest some energy in solving for some of these things, or improving some of these things that are typically taking a lot of energy today, then maybe in 5 years' time, you don't need to worry about them anymore. And if you don't need to worry about them anymore, it will save you a lot of time and give you a lot of time to go and focus on the next big thing or the next big challenge that you have, which might be modifying all your websites to work with HoloLens. It might be something else that comes out in 5 years' time. So this is an important question to focus on. And Amazon focus on this, and they consider it their flywheels. So Amazon talk about, for example, distribution and getting products to people very quickly as a flywheel. If they put enough energy into this and get the wheel moving fast enough, it just takes care of itself. It just keeps going. So this is why they're willing to put all the investment and technology necessary, as I showed earlier, into some of the algorithms and technologies behind distribution to make it as easy as possible to solve this problem over time. Again, super high level here, but continuous delivery goes hand in hand with the agile methodology. And we'll talk a little bit here about releasing code more frequently. So agile, breaking things down into smaller consumable components, getting through this as fast as you possibly can, and releasing more frequently. There are too many projects, and I've worked on too many projects that last for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and just keep going and going and going without actually launching anything. And this isn't good for anybody. And breaking your projects up and releasing code more frequently, like Amazon and these other services do, can have tremendous impact. So I'll talk about a couple of those here. So one of the reasons to release your code more frequently is you actually build the right thing. So there's this study done in 2002 by the Standish Group that says far more than 50% of functionality in software is rarely or never used. So if you can figure out which half of the software you should be building and which half of your software you shouldn't be building, you can spend the other half of your time on that beach that I was showing you earlier on. This can really happen. So how do you figure out which part of the software to build? Well, you can use continuous delivery in the scientific method. So what you do is you come up with an idea, you have a hypothesis, and you create the smallest amount of functionality you can to get some additional data. You create your minimal viable product. You get some additional data, and this might be just showing somebody, do you think this is a good idea? You get some data, you learn, and then you continue around this loop. So you optimize your processes, your software development processes, to get around this loop as fast as you possibly can, keep learning, keep building, keep innovating. If you have an idea for a feature, maybe we could do this thing. The most expensive way to find out if that's a good idea is to actually build the thing, right? To actually spend 6 months talking about how is this thing going to work, perfecting it, maybe 6, 12 months building it, and then get it out there to maybe find out it doesn't quite do what you expect. So great things can happen if you optimize your software development processes to get around this loop as fast as you possibly can. And there are all sorts of amazing quotes around this and recovering from failure through doing this. In the startup accelerator we saw the other day, we saw several quotes on the wall related to this, and here are a couple of my favorites. All of my quotes so far have been by a writer. Clearly this isn't a writer, this one. Okay, second reason why we release more frequently, we reduce the risk of release. So anybody who's worked in enterprise software or worked with large organizations, who's had a release to production that maybe hasn't gone as you'd expected to do and it maybe ruined your night? People had this before? Right. So when you're driving home that night or going home very late, having solved this, what are you saying to yourself? You're saying, I'm never doing that again. I'm never touching that application again, right? It's gonna have all these problems. But that's not the answer to the problem, because what's happened there typically is you haven't released it frequently, and when you've released it, there's been an awful lot of change to the application, right? Maybe it's change over 6 months, maybe it's change over a longer period. And when you deploy that with a significant change, lots of things can go wrong. And what happens when lots of things can go wrong? Something definitely goes wrong. Something will definitely go wrong. And instead of being that feature I wrote yesterday, it was that feature that guy wrote 3 months ago who's now on holiday. And it's very, very difficult to solve these problems. It's some of the most challenging things we face. So if we break this up into much smaller releases, it's no longer that thing that person did 3 months ago. It was the code he wrote yesterday, and he knows exactly what he was doing, and he can get straight back into that and potentially fix it straight away, and it can actually make things a lot easier. So if you release more frequently, you can actually build the right thing. People get nervous because they're like, okay, releasing is really hard, but actually releasing more frequently can make releasing a lot easier as well. So you can build the right thing, you reduce the risk of release, and you build, you build your software development processes to get around this as fast as you possibly can. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because it doesn't come naturally sometimes. Sometimes these things are hard, and the behavior we have to make them easier is not maybe what you'd expect. So You build the right thing, you reduce the risk of release, and it's the only way to show true value. If you get something in production, shows true value, you can get some learning from it, it's much better than having code sat in a repository somewhere. So how does this apply to Drupal? I'm looking forward to the session later on today about deployment in Drupal, where you have some people who've been working on my team for a while talk about deployment of code, content, and configuration, because you really need to get your hands around this to be able to make this easier. So some great things you can do with Drupal for your own websites to be able to, and web properties and applications to make deploying easier and to achieve continuous delivery. But Drupal itself is moving more towards this type of approach. So Drupal 8 has been in development for a number of years, right? So it's been there for a number of years, and there are some fundamental things you have to build that just take time, right? They just take time to build. Like, actually, those caves from the beginning, they took 900 years, right? The agile methodology wouldn't have made them any faster using rocks to dig out those caves. So Drupal 8 will be coming very shortly. Does anybody know what happens 6 months after Drupal 8 is released with semantic versioning? 8.1. 6 months after Drupal 8 is released, Drupal 8.1 will be released. And this isn't just bug fixes and these things like you can typically experience. This is entirely new, shiny features that will be added to Drupal 8. Then 6 months after that, 8.2 is coming. And this will continue and continue and continue. So not just, excuse me, not just the products you're building on Drupal can you work in these methods and really innovate on, but Drupal itself will be working like that as well. So this is really, really exciting for the future of Drupal. So these are the things we talked about. We talked about technology, people, and processes. I'm really excited about Drupal aligned to each one of these. So these things are happening. This is where we're going. This is where the future is headed. And working in technology that is aligned to this is fantastic. So Drupal 8 with the Internet of Things and being able to collect all this behavior, already being ahead in terms of having ecosystem products around predicting people's behavior as well. If you want to learn about how to do remote work really well, collaborate on the Drupal project. The project itself is built using these approaches, is built from people, 2,500 people all over the world. So if you want to learn how to work like that, contribute to Drupal. And Drupal is leading the way in terms of continuous delivery, in terms of the product itself, how it's been built using these methodologies, and then also for the projects themselves. So this has a tremendous amount of, or these trends have a tremendous amount of impact for Drupal. And one of the reasons I'm here is I believe this has a tremendous amount of impact for people in India as well. So the Internet of Things, there's a lot that you guys will learn about that as you will benefit from these kind of technologies as well. You're leading the way in a lot of the things we talked about new education. A lot of the things about infrastructure here we talked about are coming to India first or next. And then these approaches in processes, there's so much innovation in the companies that we're working with India in terms of their processes and what they've been delivering. I expect to see and have seen our teams in India leading the way with each one of these. So that's what I wanted to talk about. One final thing to mention. So DrupalCon, Annie mentioned DrupalCon. Anybody who's been to DrupalCon, this is an amazing event. This is really the Drupal event to go to. And this is a picture from DrupalCon Austin. So North America has the largest DrupalCon each year. This was DrupalCon Austin last year. It was exhausting. It was learning about Drupal. It was meeting all the people from the community, partners doing lots of great work. It was a really terrific event. So that was fantastic. Does anybody know, hopefully you guys know what this graph is, what this chart is. Who knows what this is? Go for it.
Traffic to Drupal.org.
Traffic to Drupal.org. Okay. So the biggest traffic to Drupal.org, where you're collaborating on Drupal and building Drupal, today, the biggest traffic comes from the US. Who can spot the country in slightly darker blue there that has the second biggest traffic to Drupal.org? India, right? So the combination of this shows how many people are collaborating and working on Drupal in India. These kind of events in just one location, these show how many people are collaborating and getting involved. And the quality event is just absolutely fantastic. And these things combined make this really no surprise that next we want to bring DrupalCon to India in 2016. So this, So this is really, really, really exciting. So this could be a really big event, and I actually have a challenge for everybody here with DrupalCon in India in 2016. So the US is the biggest DrupalCon, and it's the biggest contributor to Drupal or traffic to Drupal.org. At the moment, the second biggest DrupalCon, where's the second biggest DrupalCon? Europe. In Europe. But the second biggest traffic going to Drupal.org is India. So when we bring DrupalCon to India in 2016, you need to build the community, get people involved, get people who are already working on Drupal out to make DrupalCon in India the second biggest DrupalCon in the world. And I think this will be tremendously impactful. It will be absolutely fantastic for the future of Drupal. So I'm really, really excited about this. And that's everything I had to share. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's everything.
Anybody has a question?
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? I haven't seen anything on Twitter. Anybody? I had a question about Loon, for example.
Sure.
So when you have all these balloons floating around in the stratosphere, they're going to be tethered, obviously. So how do you get the planes not to crash into them?
They're so high up. They are.
What about the tether itself?
They're not tethered.
They're not going to be tethered?
They're not tethered.
Oh.
So they're in the stratosphere. So they're about as high up as you can go without going into space, right? So they're going incredibly high up, and they actually maneuver by being able to control their altitude, so they can come down and then capture very high winds in order to maneuver. So it's very sophisticated. Yeah, they're not tethered. It's basically a massive, massive balloon with a plate on the bottom about this big, which has an antenna, solar panel, and some other equipment that just communicates with the balloons either side, that communicate with the balloons either side of them, et cetera, that then downlink when there is a city below them.
They have like a fan or some kind of a navigation thing? No, nothing like that?
So they have navigation, but it's just like, I think it's a big helium balloon. So I'm certainly not the expert, but there's a lot of YouTube videos around what Google are doing. They have this live, so they're using this in New Zealand. So in some very remote locations of New Zealand, they've tested it out. They have balloons actually up there right now floating around. And Google aren't the only company who are doing this. So Facebook, I think Facebook bought the company that were making the solar-powered drones that were flying around very high. So there are lots of companies trying to achieve this and get more people on the internet.
Awesome. So we'll get some Wi-Fi up in the air now.
Yes.
With all the Internet of Things becoming, like the thing about future, data collection, data interpretation, do you think some cons
Yes.
associated with these as well?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was doing some research on this, and certainly on the Facebook example, it was enlightening to see the data that even I was giving to Facebook and what they were able to collect from this. And with the more and more data collection that's happening, I think the most important thing here is transparency, right? People understanding how their data is being used and being comfortable with that. So with British Airways, I'm very comfortable with how they're using the data, right? I don't think they've got any objective other than to sell me some more flights and make me as happy as I can be. So I'm pretty happy with that. But Facebook and some of these other companies, how they're using the data, so I'm not so sure. And my challenge there is often, Facebook is free. People always say it's free. But there's almost like this blind barter here of, well, it's free. They're making a lot of money. They're making a lot of money from our data, right? So we need to understand the value of our data. And when we're using these tools for free, and it goes for a lot of online services that are free, we've got to understand that value and make sure we're happy with this exchange. We're happy with the services we're getting in return for the data we're sharing. I think that's something we'll see over time. Lots of conversation around this with internet privacy and these things. It's another reason I didn't mention that I'm most excited about open source, because we're almost the answer to this if this gets a little bit out of control.
Anybody else with a question? No? Well, all right. Mike is going to be here all day, and hopefully, tomorrow as well.
Yep.
Yeah, great. So seek him out, bother him a little. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.
So a few more things. So we also, I forgot to mention this, but it's important. we have two giveaway partners. How many people here know of PHP Storm? So we have licenses to give out. JetBrains, who create PHP Storm, has given us 30 licenses. So go and tweet, and we're just going to run a random contest. How many people can get us get people to follow us on Twitter? We'll get licenses. Well, we'll do a random thing on the registration user accounts, basically. But 30 people will be given a license to PHP Storm. Yodas, they are an agile tool online, project management. They'll be giving it. They're giving licenses also. Yeah, yeah. We have our sponsors are running a bunch of contests. For example, IntelliSwift is giving away Xboxes. Blistering is doing something really fantastic as well. So please make sure you go and visit their kiosks. All right. Lots of cool goodies in store with everybody. TCS has obviously all kinds of things happening as well. The DCM 2015 Wi-Fi password for everybody who wants to use it is FB for Feb, FB07 IITB, all lowercase. All right. So the SSID is DCM 2015. You guys can use that. Now, Drupal in a day it was in another location. We're going to do Drupal in a day through the day in this auditorium. We're going to take a break. We have quite a lot of time. Actually, we're breaking a little early. So we're going to take a break till about 11:30. We have tea and coffee and snacks for everybody out on the second floor. And people can hang around and network. And there's one more change.
14 is going to be the first track.
Okay, yeah. So the schedule that everybody has is a little change there. For products, a smart choice is actually a featured session, and that's in track 2, track 2, seminar room 14, starting at 11:30 a.m. That's the first session in. This was Hussein a print. In fact, and Vijay Mani, he is a famous Drupal 8 core contributor. He's from London. The last session on tracks we have to ask.
We can't replicate it.
So anyway, everybody's got the password, right? FB for February 07 IITB. Quite have on anything at all around. Everybody, thank you so much. Let's break for tea and coffee, and let's get refreshed. And 11:30, all the sessions start. Wherever people want to go. Thank you all. Artists, please, stage, auditorium volunteers.
Hello.